me is like the greatest degree to have at that level. Still a medical degree, still a scientific research degree. You can get professionally licensed to practice. You can have your own practice. You can work for a hospital, you can work in schools, you can teach. So for me, it covered like 10 different things that you couldn't do with some other doctorate degrees. So it's like, it's very well-rounded and it's much needed. You could work industrial organizational psychology, basically working for companies to figure out who to hire, who not to hire, based on their personality, their strengths, their weaknesses, things like that. So psychology is very beneficial career-wise, depending on kind of which way you go with it. So we started off with just an introduction, asking like, hey, what do we think about psychology? What do we hope to learn? Why is the class even worth it? It's probably one of the greatest classes to begin with because it helps us think about ourselves, right? And with understanding ourselves, we can understand other people. If not, we'll be lost to ourselves. We'll be lost to other people. So we'll get into all of the clinical disorders and things like that towards the end of the class. But right now, we're just getting like the history and the gist of what we're going to be studying. So 3 main levels of analysis in psychology. One is biological. Where does the mind lie? Right? When people say mind, are we talking the brain? Right? We're talking central nervous system. Does your muscles have memory? Does your toes have memory? Does your hands learn on and on? Do they operate on themselves? Or is everything just located in the brain somewhere, right? From what we understand, the whole body is learning at a cellular level. Think of your cells as just little inputs, sending information back and forth at the speed of light. Your brain may send a signal, chemical, electrical signal for your arm to move or for you to walk, you to do this task or this task. At the speed of light, it happens immediately. You don't even really have to be aware of it. So that's the biological approach we'll start looking into. And the psychological, which is just purely psyche, purely mental processes, which really deal with the brain, right? Why do we have trauma? Why do we suffer? Why do we have anxiety? Why do we have depression? Why do these external forces bother us? Why do things bother us? Why do you think the way you think? Can you change the way you think? Can you not feel the way you feel? Can you not be emotional towards certain things you would traditionally be emotional to? That's the psyche. And then the socio-cultural part. Hey, does society make you who you are? Are you wearing that shirt because social forces, social engineering? Did Instagram make you buy that sweater? Right? But they hack your mind to present you with a new shoe to be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want. I get that. Right? The very smart, intelligent people who do marketing and know psychology place these forces on you, right? You have their hairstyle for some social, cultural reason. Right? The culture you come from, which is a force, the family you grew up with, your lineage, your heritage, your ethnicity, your race, your gender, your sex, that all of these things within our culture force these things upon you, right? Did you really choose that stuff? Or are you just a byproduct of other people's choosing for you? All right, some biological influences, right? Genetic predispositions, meaning inherited traits. Mom and dad passed on some genes, some codes, some information inside your body. Maybe that makes you a little more sensitive to be a substance abuser. Maybe that makes you more sensitive to be the world's greatest athlete if you practice. Maybe that makes you very sensitive to be intellectually savvy or great, right? Very analytical, philosophical, however you are. So which means that certain information we have, we could be predisposed to have certain behaviors because of them, if exposed to the right conditions. Genetic mutations, random errors in gene replication, right? Things like cancer, things in our body we don't control, things just mutate and our body goes out of whack, and now we got all type of problems we deal with, which could be psychological too. Genetic mutations can cause differences in hormones, right? Hormones are all these bunch of chemicals being processed through your body. Sometimes when what we call homeostasis, which is just a balance, right? Your body wants to be in balance. It doesn't want too little of any of this. It doesn't want too much. When you take certain substances, drugs and alcohol, guess what? Now you got too much of something. Your body's not in homeostasis. Things are out of whack. Now you're going to completely act differently or do different things. Natural selection of adaptive traits and behavior passed down through generations. Remember, it's not about, like with Darwinism, right? Survival of the fittest is not the strongest person. It's not the strongest animal. It's not the most intelligent animal that gets passed on. It's only the one most adaptive to change. If the environment changes, whoever changes quickly, that was to get passed on, not the strongest, biggest elephant, right? The elephant more responsive to the change of its environment. And genes responding to our environment. Environment is important. Environment may be the most important, right? Where you grew up, who you grew up with, what environment you are in probably impacts you the most. So if you change your environment, you can change the way you think. That's why people move different places. I hate it here. I'm depressed in Chicago for 6 months out of the year, 8 months out of the year. I'm leaving. They go somewhere, they never come back because the environment may be better, natural environment. Maybe they see mountains and ocean every day, right? Instead of just seeing concrete and buildings. So environment is extremely important. Then we got psychological influences because of that. Learned fears and other learned expectations. Learn where you taught to be frightened of that thing. You say, hey, I have a fear of heights. Baby, where did that come from? It has to come from. Everything has to have a reason. Nothing just comes out of thin air, right? Which means you could be learned that. And like we said, if I asked you, hey, what's your thoughts when you were 2 years old, what a mom and dad did? Or your caretaker, or caregiver, guardian. You back up, Professor Ross, I don't remember. Just because you don't remember, does it don't matter? Yes, it matters, right? It's there, it's in your memory. You don't remember it, your body does. Your very existence remembers. Whether you're potty trained too late, right? Whether you had some sort of trauma at 2 years old, whether they dropped you on your head and never told you, right? Maybe they scared you with an animal and you get shocked at 2 years old. You don't remember it now, it still matters. It will always matter unless you conquer it. Emotional responses, right? Predispositions to be emotional. If somebody triggers you with a word, how emotional responsive are you to them, right? And then we can say on the extreme side, sociopaths, psychopaths, somebody says something to them that's the most horrible thing, and they laugh. Like, how do you laugh? I would have really hurt somebody that said that. Right? Nothing matters. Only thing that matters is me. Which means they have a different predisposition than the average normal person, right? Because all we just talking about when we say disorders, people have disorders, just like, hey, here's the average, here's the bell curve, everybody's in the middle of the bell, and on the tail end are extremes. Too much of something, too little. That's disorders. Add up the average. And then we had cognitive processing and perceptual interpretation. Everybody said, what color is the sun? People said orange, yellow, whatever. But then I asked them what color are the stars at night. People said white. Why would it be any different? The sun is a star. Right? So it's white, which means you have different interpretations and perceptions based on whatever. Right? Human beings can only see certain visible spectrums of light. Human beings can only hear certain frequencies of sound. Don't mean that the other sounds don't exist. Other animals can hear it. Bats and rats and dogs and cats. Don't mean it don't exist. You can't hear it. But even beyond that is your perception, which is like where you sit in this classroom. Okay, we're all looking up here, but you're all sitting in different seats. Right? Same classroom, different perspective. Same classroom, different angles. Right? Which means we all see things different. Thus, we may interpret something different. Thus, how we were brought up, we may interpret certain words or phrases different. We may interpret certain sounds different. Right? Some people may be afraid of certain things they hear, others not. based on their interpretation of it. And all of this causes mental processes, right? Along with this bottom, which is the presence of others, which is society, social culture, right? Others influencing us. Family expectations. Hey, why'd you go to college? Right? Maybe if you didn't go to college, you feel that a lot of people will be disappointed, may think you're a failure, may feel like you're a loser, or, whatever the case. Thus, that might be a force on you to show up, go to college, right? And they may say, this is the only way to get a great job, it's the only way, it's the most safest bet you could take. Which could be true, it may not be true, who knows, right? Eventually, you gotta figure that one out for yourself. But you probably do have some forces on you that influence you because of that. Peer and other group influences. You guys came from high school, we all went to high school, right? So there's a lot of influences on who's cool, who's not, who got the worst shoes on, who got the best clothes, who look like they got money, who looks broke, who's attractive, who's not, right? All these different forces made up by people. You either accept them or you reject them. You either believe it because other people tell you, or you can reject it. So there is a predisposition for people to question what other people think and question very powerful influences, right? Because you'll feel FOMO, fear of being missing out on the trends in the group. You'll feel isolated and depressed if you don't succumb to the trends and the forces. You're a weirdo, right? You'll feel like you're the only one left out thinking differently. And compelling models such as in the media, right? The media is very smart, savvy, got a lot of money, a lot of great minds thinking about how to create models to influence your behavior. Social influencers, right? Social media influencer. What are you doing? I'm influencing people's minds and shaping the way they act, behave, and think. Any questions? All right, some basic subfields in psychology. Just research, applied research. You can become a counselor, you can be a high school counselor, you can be a therapist. Clinical psychologists deal with clinical disorders. Psychiatrists, what's the difference between psychologists and psychiatrists? What's the difference? Anyone know? Yes? Yeah, so think about it, right? The mind processes electrochemical processes, right? Hormones are secreted. You have depression, we'll give you antidepressive medication, right? You got too little serotonin, hey, we'll give you something to jack up serotonin, melatonin, endorphins, all these different things. That's what psychiatrists do. But they may not be using your mind as opposed to psychologists. Psychologists will use therapy to try to use your own mind to try to change your behavior, try to create good mental health based on you just changing actions, behavior, etc. And then community psychologists, which deals with observing groups of people, right? How to create better living standards for groups of people, better mind frames. And think of impoverished communities, right? So living in Chicago, you could drive around certain areas, you'd be like, well, so this is a bad area, this is a good area. Why are people in the bad areas so angry? Why are there so much violence? Why are people so triggered over here, right? Simple answer to me, wouldn't you be triggered if you didn't live in those conditions and be broke every day, right? You would probably be mad too, you'd be on edge, and you'd probably be doing just the same stuff there, which makes us no different. So keep that in mind. We're all pretty much the same. What makes it different? Your nature and your nurture. Some get a little bit of your genetics, and some get a little bit of your environment in which you grew up. So kind of looking down on people and their behavior, yeah, you could do that. That's an easy thing to do. But we also could say, hey, any of us could be Nazis. Because those social forces are very strong. Any of us could be murderers, part of a genocide, and then later on apologizing for it. Oh, I just did my job. If I didn't do it, they were going to kill me. So I chose one or the other, either death for them or death for me. Put somebody in that position, I guarantee you their values, morals, ethics, and position, a lot of them will change quickly, right? So that's part of the whole think about self. Think about how well-grounded you are in yourself, knowing yourself. But then also questioning everything you've learned and kind of unlearning or relearning it too, so you finally come to who you are and not who people want you to be. Roadblocks to critical thinking, hindsight bias, right? I knew it all along. We have this, right? Hindsight is 20/20. You can see clear after the fact. When you did it and when it happened, right? You did what you did, and it happened the way it happened. And after the fact, you may think, well, I know why it happened, right? We all tend to do that, which means we have a bias just because of time. Time has passed, and now we think we knew why things happened. But really, things just may have happened just the way it happened, and for whatever reason it happened. We may never know why, right? But we want to know why. Overconfidence, tendency to think we know more than we do. A lot of us tend to do this, right? We live in a individualistic society where people are kind of all about themselves. And a lot of people are arrogant, authoritative, feel that they can't learn, meaning they know it all already, or they're smarter in the subject than what they truly are, right? Which is good, confidence is good, but overconfidence may be bad. And they may prevent you from learning. Perceive patterns and random events, random sequences and selling, making sense, create calm, right? We want to create order out of chaos. A lot of people are not good in their behavior unless things are very orderly, right? Then there's other people who like chaos because they like problem solving. Right? Those people tend to have certain jobs because they like trying to create order out of chaos. Scientific inquiry can help us sift reality from overestimated intuition and illusion. If you're working in science, you're only working with facts, right? You set aside your emotions, you set aside what you think something should be like, you set aside what you believe something should be like or is, and you thus only look at the data and the facts to support what's being said. That's just a good way of thinking if you want to be scientific. If you don't want to be scientific, no. But we do have intuition, right? So people say the gut brain. I feel it in my gut, right? You're like, oh, I didn't feel it in my head. I feel it in my gut. I feel it in my heart, right? Which means that in some way people feel that there's intelligence all over the body, right? Not just up in the brain. You're like, I can feel that that's a bad thing to do. I can feel that that's creepy. I better get away from here. You could feel it other than processing rationality and logic in your brain. Psychological science in a post-truth world, right? Why we are so vulnerable to believing untruths. Maybe too much information. Remember we said too much of anything is bad. Too much of anything is bad. I've made a lot of money personally. I've seen a lot of people with a lot of money. I hung out with some billionaires. And too much money is bad. Too much of anything is bad. Too much of food is bad. Too emotional is bad. Too logical is bad. Anything is too bad. Anyway, we have a lot of information out there. Everybody can Google anything. Google will pull up 600 million results. Pick one. Pick one and say that's the facts. That's the truth. Depending on what's your source. So it means that anybody can put information on the internet, and now people are just left to, since we have a short attention span with all this information, we can only take so little because we've only got a certain amount of time. People see something very quickly, don't even read the full thing, and take it off as truth. And they'll be spouting, talking about it all day, that this is the truth, when it be completely fake. Then you have to wait later for somebody to tell you it's fake and go research and see what's fake. Repetition, repeated statements become more believable. This is in politics. You say a lie enough, it becomes the truth. Right? You say it a million times, eventually people start to believe it. Why? Because we do have a low attention span. Right? And marketers know this too. You repeat showing the same stuff over and over again. Eventually you might buy it. Like, you keep showing me this shoe. I'm gonna save it. I might get it later, right? Keep showing me more until you finally buy it. Availability of powerful examples, vivid images, and stories gain more attention. Nobody's looking up nice stories on the internet. I wouldn't say nobody, but predominantly, you're looking up something that's either funny, looking up something with extreme violence because of the curiosity of the type of violence and the fact that somebody did that to another person. Looking up sad news and sharing it with family members. Oh, look who died, you know, a 3-year-old got hit by a car. No one's looking up a cat saved in a tree or something like that. You're like, who cares? Right? That's not interesting. Which means what? Human beings gravitate towards more similar kind of negative stuff, right? Because it makes it more interesting, right? And vivid imagery. We want to see things that wow us. Wow, look at this. Share it. Group identity and echo chamber of like-minded groups and news that affirm our views are accepted. News sources that do not are demonized. Think about it, groupthink. We've classified ourselves into categories, right? Black, white, Latino, Asian, Middle Eastern, right? Classified and organized human beings into groups. For what reason? I don't know. Figure it out. For what reason we've classified human beings. We've classified them even further beyond that. That's just the general racial classification. Social construct. What does it mean? It means that you look like me, most likely you think like me, you're gonna support everything I do? Absolutely not, right? If anything, if we look at FBI crime statistics, you kill people who look like you. Whites kill whites, 90-something%. Blacks kill blacks, 90-something%. Latinos kill Latinos, 90-something%. So basically, it's like, well, what's the real purpose of it? There's probably some really bad reasons for it, right? Because of this big game system called society that we have. So some very smart people have created these classifications a long time ago, and basically we just accept them. Don't question them, accept it, it is what it is. Move on. And from that, hey, who do you believe? You believe the people in your group. We're tribalistic. We're teams. My team versus your team. Republican versus Democrat. Right? We hate the other side. We're stupid. However we feel about them. Right? We stereotype people based off what we've seen on TV or think they are, even though we may have very limited experience with them. We've already formed opinions about them based on that and what our group says. So groupthink. Right? Demonize people for whatever reason. Questions? What's the time? Somebody keep track of time. 8:30. 30. No questions? Comments? Yes?
Why do you think that, like, do you have an opinion on why you think we attack, like, people that look like that?
Well, because of that very reason. We've agreed with people that we're more comfortable with people who look like us. Mm-hmm. And if we're more comfortable with something, it makes it easier to both agree with them, both link up with the people in our group, eat, and also kill them too, right? We feel like we have a right, a more right of access to those people. If somebody looks completely different now, it's just added this foreign idea that I might get some real trouble if I hurt that other group, right? Whatever it's kind of expected. You know, so it's subconscious. I wouldn't say it's something that we're aware of. It's not in the forefront of our minds, but it's something subconscious because if we believe this stuff for a long time, now it's buried in us. But it's there. We're not like just outwardly thinking about it. We're like, we've been doing this a long time, right? Believe in this stuff for a long, long time. And once you believe something a long time, it's very hard to unbelieve something a long time. It normally takes something very tragic or shocking for people to change. Contrary to popular belief, human behavior really doesn't change that much. By the time you're like 40, that's who you are. Right? All the therapy in the world. You may change some certain things, maybe you beat an addiction or something like that. But your personality, who you are, kind of sticks with you by the time. Unless you truly start discovering self. You start really questioning your own existence and like everything people told you, and belief about something that you never even tried to experience yourself or think about because you're frightened of it. Most importantly, I think we're fearful of what we may find. We may find that something we've thought we knew for a long time is actually not true. And that's a frightening thing to be like, man, wow, that's not true. Right? Perceptions are. And we also have a hard part accepting things, period. Acceptance is one of the hardest things. You know, even if we look at parents, we may place them on pedestals, but they're people like us. And we may think that the stuff we do, they wouldn't dare do or did not do. Who knows? It may have did worse. They're not going to tell you because that's not going to be helpful to raise you, right? But you do got to try to have an understanding that we're all kind of more similar than different. If you think you've done something and it's the newest thing, like, no, that's living in a bubble. That means 1 billion people already did that. You just think you did. This is just a representation of moral contagion in social networks. You know, you can basically say red pill, blue pill, right? And the opposing forces on social media to really divide people and create sort of just like dynamics in politics, Democrat, Republican, right? Blue and red. It really shapes people to be extreme. And you can see in the middle, which is the sweet spot of life, this is always a sweet spot. Like, hey, I disagree, but I understand. Like, I'm in this religion, but I'm not that. I disagree, but I understand where you believe that. Sure. Based on where you come from, whatever you're raised, that's fine. You're human just like me. I understand. I don't agree. I am who I am. You are who you are. We have different values, but I understand. This is not the case for social network. This is like, no, this way, that way. And if anything goes against that, I'm sensitive to it. Right? I'm offended. Right? Well, why does your rights impede mine? Your offense, I could be offended that you're offended. And never cycle never ends. You know what I mean? So basically, there's no middle compromise. It's either my way or the highway. Right? Rules for me, not for you. Okay. All right, key terms. You'll hear this in every class. All right, every class you take, business, medicine, what have you. Theory. What's a theory? What do we think a theory is? Yeah, it could be like an assumption or a belief. Typically, it's something that hasn't been proven wrong. Doesn't mean that it's a fact, like a law or something, you know? But it's basically posing ideas about something that others maybe within the field have not contradicted. Okay, well, as far as we know, we're gonna go with this. As far as we know, right now in time, we're going with this, right? The theory of relativity, Einstein. Like, man, that's not a law. We've been doing that for 100 years. No, it's still a theoretical. It may have changed, right? Quantum mechanics, quantum physics. But okay, Einstein, you might have got a few things wrong. Hypothesis, testable predictions, which are assumptions, right? We think in the scientific method, first thing you come up, hey, what's your hypothesis on it? What's your question? What do you think will happen? Right? That's how you start. You place some assumptions about some observation you see. which is also good when you're speaking. Think of this, like as you guys go on through college and you kind of convey opinions or ideas, it's good to kind of use this language. Like, hey, my theory, which means you don't know, right? You say, my theory on that particular thing is this. My hypothesis on this thing is, I think this would happen if this happened. Which kind of makes you, I guess, take you a little bit more serious as an academic, right? As opposed to say, man, I feel. Like, think about when you write, right? In high school, even now you write, well, I feel that if, right? I feel that if. That's not the best language to use. Not saying it's completely bad. You'd be like, hey, my theory on this, my hypothesis, and my contention, right? Bless you. So even when you're looking at stuff like this, in any kind of writing sense, it's kind of better to kind of think that way. Like, well, it's just my theory, right? It's my viewpoint on this, right? Instead of like, I feel, because then they kind of just convoluted. Like, what do you mean you feel? Operational definition is just basically the definition in action, right? Definition in action, like that thing in an active process applied to something. Right? What's the working definition of it? Replication, self-observatory, meta-analysis, after-analysis, right? Meta means after, right? Metaphysics, after the physics. Meta-analysis after analysis. So you analyze something and you analyze it again. So, right, it's always good to check your work. It's kind of like when you write something, and you send an email, and then you go back and look at it, like, dang, I misspelled like 10 words, right? You should always go back and proofread. Go back and analyze anything that you've done, so that you can go back and see your errors in the first time. Case study, which is just examples given for us to try to assess something and figure out what the issues are, how can we solve the issues, and what are some of the conclusions. Naturalistic observation, hey, just looking at the thing and observing it, what conclusions should you come about, right? Not using any instruments or tools for it. And survey, just asking questions. Which also, just to mention for the two of you who weren't here Monday, in the syllabus, there's a research participation component. So you gotta participate, I think, 2 surveys or something with the lab for the psychology department is right here down the hallway. But I'll send out information from Professor Sundermeyer, who's one of the professors in psychology. He kind of controls all the research. So it could be something short. It might be like a 10-minute questionnaire survey. Like, you know, so send me like an email to verify that you did it. And I'll ask him or something like that. That's part of your grade. Useful theories, organized observations, imply predictions that anyone can use to check the theory or derive practical applications. May stimulate further research that leads to a revised theory that better organizes and predicts observations. Basically, providing a theory to try to stimulate further questions about a subject. Okay. Needs to contribute something. Who here wants to get their PhD or their doctorate? Yeah, I don't blame you. It's a lot of work. Who here wants to get a master's? Okay. So master's is good enough for most of you, right? And most of the master's program, you'll have to write a thesis paper. And that could be long. It could maybe be, 80 pages, 100 pages about something, right? Coming up with some conclusions. Contributing something, asking some new question about some new phenomena. When I did my PhD, I think it ended up being like 300 something pages. Writing about the same stuff, but getting a lot of information and data about it. I did my research on South Africa, so I had to travel to South Africa. I'd already been doing work in South Africa. I had to go, ask questions to maybe 300-400 students out there about apartheid. I think I asked anyone knows what apartheid is in South Africa. Apartheid was just a racial division in South Africa, which still exists today, right? And dealing with the trauma from it. Basically, to sum it all up, people suffer biological, physical, mental issues because of systemic problems. So basically, to sum it all up, racism causes people to be sick, mentally, even physically. It can cause all type of stuff. Why? Because like we stated in our first class, stress kills, right? Stress is a silent killer. We all have it, right? You probably had to rush to get up early to get to class, stressful. We all got worried about how much money we have or don't have, stressful, right? Boyfriend, girlfriend, what have you, stressful, right? You gotta get this degree and we get a good grade, stressful. Nobody's without stress. There's nobody alive without some form of stress, right? You gotta figure out how to eat, what we're gonna eat, everything's stressful. But some people have a predisposition to be more stressed out than others, right? So they're predisposed to have more anxiety, which is like cortisol production when we talk about like hormones in the brain. But stress kills. Stress causes cancer. Like, why do I have cancer? Hey, you've been stressed out for 20 years of your life? Yeah. Okay, that might have did something. Just come out the blue. Stress causes immune suppression. Hey, you got a cold? You're never sick. Why are you sick? Man, I've been working too much. I'm stressed out. My boyfriend broke up with me. So these things we don't think about. We're not aware of it. But once again, when we say it's a mind-body duality, half the time we feel like we're passengers in a car. Like we're just experiencing life, looking out, going through the motions, and then our body is like this thing doing its own thing, right? Your heart beats on its own, you breathe on your own. When you're walking, you're not thinking about walking. When you're driving, you're not thinking about driving, unless somebody cuts in your lane. You're not thinking of 90% of the time, you're not conscious of it. On a 24-hour cycle, 90% of all the stuff you did was unconscious. Only 10, and that's, I would even say that's steep. 10 and less than that, people are actually thinking critically about anything, right? People are not thinking about, hey, why are we alive? What is this life thing? Like, how's this possible? This makes no sense. We're a big ball circling around at 100,000 miles an hour right now as we speak, and we can't even feel it. It makes no sense. People aren't thinking that deep. People are thinking, I gotta do this and do that. What am I gonna eat? All right, some theories, right? Sleep boosts memory, which leads to hypothesis. When sleep deprived, people remember less from the day before. This could be true today if you didn't get enough sleep, right? Research and observations, example, give study material to people before, and ample night's sleep or shortened nights sleep and test memory. And then we could confirm our conclusions, reject the findings, right? We could either confirm that, hey, that was true, hey, that was absolutely false based on the data I got from this, right? Or I need to ask a different question because our ability couldn't prove it neither here nor there. That's the scientific method. I have a question, I got a theory, right? I test it, I ask a bunch of people about it, or I put them in an experiment with sleep, deprive them of sleep. Some people get 3 hours, other people will get them 8.5. We have them all come take maybe a similar test that they took before, see how they did. See how they did when they all had 8 hours. Now come see how they did when some had 3 and some had 8. And then see the results. And then you're like, oh wow, look what I found out. I find out that out of these 100 people, 70% did very poorly based on the amount of sleep they got. That's the scientific method. That's scientific research. So think about it when people say, oh man, I did my research on the internet. Like, what kind of research? You glanced on Google for 3 seconds. And then others was like, man, I did some research, what you do? And I asked 100 people about this thing, I tested them, I went back and asked them again, put them in the laboratory and blah, blah, blah. Like, oh, you did scientific research, I get it, real research. Time, what's the time? 47? Okay. All right, I won't drag it out. Give 3 minutes to just stretch and ask some questions. Kind of an ask me anything type of situation. Yes?
What's the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath?
We'll get the psychopathy and sociopathy later, but the difference is psychopaths are born, which means they're moving to nature, nurture, genetic predisposition. Psychopaths have genetic pathologies. Sociopaths are nurtured either way. And my mom or my dad never touched me ever, never kissed me, never hugged me. Like, oh, so now I don't want to touch other people. I hate touching them. Absolutely hate. Nor do I care how they feel. Absolutely don't care how they feel. I laugh at their pain, right? I laugh at genocide or what I saw people get blown up. That can happen because of nurture or whatever happened in your development. Once again, remember we said like, hey, we'll talk about Freud, and Freud's very controversial because Freud just says everything relates to sex and aggression, right? But basically, Freud talks about development in childhood. He talks basically about oral phase when you're born. You know, suck on your mother's breast to get milk. You need a pacifier. Everything's in the mouth. You scream to make things happen, right? And then you go to another phase. This is anal phase, potty training. If it's done too early, you might be anal retentive. We call it anal retentive. OCD, everything, when we put this like this, I was like, go crazy, it's not organized. But things have to be a certain way. Then you go to phallic phase where you realize you have reproductive organs as children, right? And that can create sexual issues in life. People that are highly sexual, very promiscuous, right? Or people that, you know, don't like sexual activities. And then from that latent phase, which is kind of where we are in this point, post-puberty phase. Right after you went through puberty, that's when you kind of start figuring out who you really are in a lot of dimensions. You were going to ask a question?
Oh yeah, what is like anal?
Basically mean your fixations on certain things, right? You want to retain how certain actions are, behavior. You're very specific about things, right? You want things orderly. You could be OCD, right? Things like that. Things have to be a certain way. And if they're not, you face high anxiety. Like, I'm so stressed out. Why? This is not the way how I want it to go. All right. You guys have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you Friday.